This tutorial, I'll be showing you guys how to make music player in Rec Room using CV2. Let's get straight to it. First, we're gonna need 3 buttons. Then we're gonna need a subtract chip. Then we're gonna need an integer variable. Then we're gonna need a less than. We're gonna need an if chip. And we can just clone this integer variable. For the middle button, we're gonna need a bool variable. We're gonna need a not chip. We're gonna need an if chip. Then for the button on the right, we're gonna need an add chip. We're gonna need an integer variable. Going to need a greater than, a list get count, a list create, going to need a list get element, gonna need another subtract, going to need another if chip, and then we're gonna need to clone another integer variable. We're gonna need an audio player. Going to need an if chip. We're gonna need a greater than or equal to, and then we're gonna clone the integer variable. Then we're going to clone the integer variable to the right side of both the if and the greater than or equal to. And then we're going to get an add chip. So now we're going to start off with the wiring. So we're going to wire our button pressed to the first integer variable. Then we're going to configure that integer variable to name it song. Then we're going to do the same for all integer variables. We're going to configure it and name it song, so that they're all the same. So now we're going to wire the output of the integer variable to the top value on the subtract. Then we're going to wire the input of the integer variable to the output of the subtract. Then we're going to go to the bottom value on the subtract and change it to 1 so that it counts the number selected down 1. Then we're going to wire our output of our first integer variable to the a value on the less than. Then we're going to wire our result of the less than to the condition on the if. The input execution of our if goes to the output of the integer variable. Then we wire our integer variable input to the then on the if chip. Then we're going to configure this first button. We're going to name it previous. This circuit that we just wired up allows us to go to the previous song inside the playlist. If you press the button, the integer variable is subtracted by 1. And if it's less than 0, then it will set the number back to 0 so that it doesn't go to the negatives. We wire pressed to the input of the bool variable. We wire our output of the bool variable to the input of the if. Then we want to do the same what we did for the integer variable. We want to wire the output of our bool variable to the input of the not and the result to the bool variable. This is called the loop when you're putting the chip into itself. So this makes it alternate from true to false every time you click this button. Then you want to wire the condition on the if to the output of the bool variable. Then you want to wire the then on the if chip to play on the audio player and else to stop. And we can configure this button and change the name of it to play/stop. This button will allow us to play and stop the song within the playlist. This circuit is basically saying if we press the button, it will get the output of this bool variable and it will flip it and input it into itself. And every time we click the button, it will alternate between false and true. So when the value is true in the condition, it will play the song. But if it's false, it will go out else and go to stop. Next, we're going to work on the next button to go forward into our playlist. So now we're going to wire button pressed to the input of the song. And we're going to wire the output of that song variable to the input of this if. Then we want to do the loop again. which is wiring the input of the integer variable to the output of the add, wiring the output of the integer variable to the input of the add. We're going to change the sum to 1. We're going to wire this integer variable to the a value on the greater than, and the b value will go to the subtract. The result on the greater than will go to the condition on the if. The top value on the subtract will go to the list get count. And we're going to wire the list to our other list create, as well as the list on the list create will go to the list get element, and we will wire the list get element to the audio on the audio player. So now your list create should turn yellow, and it should state audio in the inputs. On the list get element, we want to wire the difference to the index. The bottom value of the subtract, we want to change it to 1, because an index, it starts from 0 and it counts up. So whatever value we have, we want to subtract it by 1. Then we will wire the subtract difference to the input of this integer variable. And then we're going to wire the input execution to the then on this if chip. We're going to wire audio player finished to the input of this if. Then we're going to wire the condition to the result on the greater than or equal to. The a value will get connected to any of these integer variables, and the b value will get wired up to the subtract next to the list get count. The then execution on the if will get wired to the top integer variable, and the else will get wired to the bottom integer variable. We're going to make loop once again, which is wiring the output of the integer variable to the top value and wiring the input to the output of the add. Then we're going to add by 1. Reason why I added this circuit after finished is so when the song is done playing, it will play the next song on its own. And once it reaches the max amount of songs inside the playlist, it will restart back to 0, and it will continue until you press stop. So this list create is where you will import all your audios, aka your songs, within the playlist. For instance, I'm going to use 4 songs. So we're just going to make 4 sample audios. We're going to connect the outputs of those to the items on the list create. If you want to record an audio, you can just configure the chip and click edit sample. You can hit record and you can play an audio through your mic using Voicemeeter or using SoundPad. Once you have those created or you have those imported, you should be able to play your songs. Once you hit play, once you hit stop, once you hit next and previous. Let's say for instance you want a bigger playlist. Configure the list create and you keep adding inputs for as many songs as you want. You keep clicking add input for the amount of songs that you want, but every list create can only hold 64 inputs. So once you reach that max, it will say add input. I'll say, hey, I want more than 64 songs. I want to make my playlist bigger. We can clone our list create, and we want to get a list concat. You can wire the list create output to the first list, and the second list can go to your next list create. So now if all of these were filled in, like so, imagine you had your full playlist of different sample audios. I just connected the same one Shaka showing as example. And now that you can see the count is 65. Now if I were to clone this list create in these sample audios, and we were to connect this list 2 to the next list create, it should change 65 and 65 to 130, which it did. So now we can wire the result of the list concat, and we can drop it down to the list get count and the list get element. So now it will count up all the way up until 129, and then it will reset the song playlist. But say you wanted 3. But say you wanted 3 list creates, which is an odd number. If you wanted an odd number, you can move up the list create. You can clone once again. Then you can clone you another list concat. You can wire up the first output of the list concat we had, and then wire up the second list of the new list create we just created. Now it displays 195 because we combined all of the lists. So now we can wire the output result to the list get element and the list get count. And now it will count up to 194, then it will reset after it's done playing 194 songs. But make sure you configure your audio player component. You change use audio channel to music, and you turn on interrupt current sound, as well as turning off synced. If it was synced, that means everybody would hear the same song. If it's unsynced, then everybody will hear different songs. But since we have these integer variables unsynced, we should make this component unsynced. And that was your tutorial on how to make a music player using CV2 and Rec Room. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next tutorial.
And this is my profile. Subscribe.